The story I'll read for you is called Summertime at Granny's House.
There once was a small child, happy in her own company.
There once were 3 little girls who lived with their mother and grandmother.
So I was 14 years old, and me and my best buddy.
I think back to my childhood and I feel lucky with the experiences I had.
This is a dream that I think really shows how we view transformation on an internal level.
T.E. Lawrence said, "All men dream, but not equally."
Dear alcohol, it's been 164 days since we were last together. Feels longer, doesn't it?
This is a favourite haunt. The big mirrored wall behind the bar bounces light around.
My father was 13 when the war broke out. He was walking home from school one day in September 1940.
The last person that died was my nana, and she was the real close person in my life.
I'm nobody. Stripped bare, down to my last molecule.
I'm going to take you back to the summer of 1976. It was hot.
When I first open my eyes, I see light. There are noises around me. I am afraid.
1990, London. Joining the crowd at Whitehall, something felt different.
A Saturday evening in early August 1979. We are eating our dinner in the lounge from trays on our laps.
Act 1. I have barely time to breathe, to say. Days fly by.
My daughter has been undone some travelling, and then she came home.
It was a piece of work with a big insurance company, and I had to go from Heathrow to the US, and I'd never worked in the US before.
Hello, and welcome to the Storytellers podcast, Series 2 launch. We will, as always, start with a story.
What am I? Am I the man on the plane, hoping to spark up a conversation so I can share another fascinating story? It seems like I'm still trying to find my style, to see what works for me. Maybe I'm stuck in the cellar, not sure how to properly express myself, but desperate to let the world see my true colours. Could it be that I am the child that spent my summers feasting at Granny's, or have I grown up to truly struggle with something that so often gives me joy? I could roll the dice and hope for the best, but it seems like it's time to say goodbye. If I am who I think I am, it was worth all of those battles. There have been so many. As seas carve coastlines, there will be more, but it's not always been a chore. There have been times of joy, laughter, and nostalgia, especially as I look back at my teenage years and making fun of all the boys. Yet there was a ghost in my house. It was a ghost that travelled back from the bar to remind me of the injustices of the world. It was accompanied by a sense of systematic abuses that only ever contributed towards the mental anguish that is burnout. There are other paths. We don't have to be zombies going into the life that others choose, a life that bites away at our souls. We can choose our own path. We can choose to live. We can choose to bathe in the forest and travel to the beat of our own drum. We can choose to listen to Madonna. We can choose to overcome the worst of what the world has to offer and the worst of our own minds too. It's so much easier to make these choices when we have the right people on our side. One small gesture can change everything. Sometimes for the worse, but often for the better. Is it time to move from a world full of logic to a world that understands and takes care of emotion, a world where science can unlock our potential and stories can help us to understand it. I'm trying to get rid of my baggage, trying to unsquash the squashed, to be who I truly want to be. Now enough, you don't want flannel. What am I? I am the question that started it all in the very first episode. I am the answer that is always being searched for. I am the story that brings together every other story from series 1. I have said farewell once, but in just a day, my friends series 2 will be saying hello again. I am the Storytelling with Puck podcast, and I am yours. I'm ready. Are you?
Well, I'm ready to explain why we're all here today. There are 2 reasons for this wonderful occasion. The first is, of course, to say thank you to all of our guests who took part in Series 1 of the Storytelling with Puck podcast. We've had incredible feedback, and it's all because of you. So much of the positivity has come from the variety of stories, tones, styles, and emotions felt. That's down to every single guest, some of whom we're lucky enough to have here today.
And the second reason for us being here is to celebrate the fact that Series 2 starts tomorrow, as I mentioned in the first story. Shona Hirons is our first guest, and her tale is so powerful. A question, you don't have to answer it here right now, but how many near-death experiences have all of you had? After my conversation with Shona, I imagine you might find it a little bit hard to keep up with her, but you'll have to listen tomorrow to find out more. Next week, we have Catherine Williams joining us for episode 2. She didn't mention any near-death experiences. That's not to say she hasn't had any. But there is an amazing portal into a fiction reader's imagination. So what better way to celebrate all of this than with stories today? Thank you everyone who is watching this live on YouTube, and to all of those who are watching the recorded version too. Now, it's time to show some appreciation for all of our storytellers here today, and all of them from Series 1.
Trisha, please, the room is yours. Please share your story.
Thank you. So, yet again, I'm going to take you back to the 70s, and I'm calling this A Twisted Centrinians. So, in 1972, I left the cloisters of the girls' school that I had been at for all 11 years of my education. And after a summer of huge expectation, it was my first day at my new school where I was going to study for my A-levels. Yes, in 1972, September, I joined a boys' school. Was it a mistake? No. I was an experiment. I was one of just 6 girls in this huge boys' school, the kind of school that is a sort of St. Trinian's look-alike. Huge grass going up to a massive old building with a chapel and a speech hall and you name it. 6 girls amongst hundreds of boys. Great, that sounds like a lark. Well, what happened was my inner naughty rebel side kind of began to take flight. It had been somewhat squashed at my other school, but was fed up with being squashed. So I'm just going to recount a few of my rebellious memories of those years. And I'll start with the time that I decided it would be a very good idea to save up all the tokens and spend them on one night in the 6th form bar. Yes, it was a strange system and we are going back in time, but there we go. You weren't really supposed to do this. I was being very naughty, but I did. And I didn't ever take my drink very well, but to mix sherry and cider and beer, which were the only options available in the bar, was definitely a bad idea. I staggered from the bar across to the dining hall and felt very giddy and not too well. And then I thought, no, I know what, I'll go and find that boy that I'm crazy about, infatuated about, and I'm going to tell him I'm infatuated with him. And so I did. I found his study, and as I opened the door, I basically put the contents of the cider and the sherry and the beer all over the floor in front of him. It really did nothing to progress our relationship. That was pretty much the end of us, me and Nigel. But I went on to have more adventures, like the time I escaped out the back of the school secretly with two other guys, and we climbed up a big hill and ended up in a pub where we met Eric Clapton. It was during his not too good days, pretty much propping up the bar, but it was an experience, and we creeped back in and we got away with it. But what I didn't get away with was the time I decided it would be a great idea to have a cigarette in secret. And I chose a great location to do this, along all the wooden floorboard corridors and the quad and all the arches of this school. I found a loo. And I decided to light up in there. Great. The only problem was it was an internal loo with no windows or ventilation. And sure enough, the housemaster passed by and was puzzled by the smoke coming out from underneath the door. So that was not a good plan. I managed to continue my education, and I wonder if I'd put so much effort into my studies, I might have actually passed my French A-level. But all I can remember from my French A-level tutor classes was the one where I sat on a sofa with the best looking boy in the school called Rick. And inadvertently, because it was a small sofa in our master's study, our knees were touching for the entire period, and that memory has remained with me ever since. But you might be thinking at this stage, did I do any work? Was I obsessed with boys? Well, I did a bit of work, and yeah, I was obsessed with boys. I was 16 and 17, duh. But you know, the moral of this really, I had an inner rebel. And there was nothing wrong with having that inner rebel. It had been very squashed for a long time. But I guess what I think in hindsight is there were better ways I could have let it out, more productive ways that would have made me feel better and maybe have been more helpful to other people around me. So I would suggest that we all harness our inner rebel, embrace it with enthusiasm, and live our lives with that kind of little edge that inner rebel has, but also with curiosity and enthusiasm, and really don't mix sherry and cider. It's not a good plan.
Such great advice.
A great story to get us started. I think we all have a bit of a rebel inside us, and maybe you wouldn't have had such great stories to tell if you let it out in a different way. So
we're not going to speak about all of these stories too much. We're just going to enjoy them today. That's why we're all here. Just absorb what you can, take what you want from it, and I'm sure that you'll be taking a lot, because as with that first story from Trisha, no pressure, guys, but the expectations are high. And on that note, Gary.
Hey, hello. Right, just a very brief introduction. As part of storytelling with Puck 6 months ago now, I did some fiction, and this is an extract from the continuation of that, so I'm just going to read it. He gulped back his steaming coffee, then set the mug on the small table next to his new armchair. Sitting back, he straightened the dressing gown over his thighs, and resting his hands gently in his lap, Matthew closed his eyes and began. He'd read nothing about meditation, and did not even call it that. He didn't call it anything. All Matthew knew was that lying on that mattress, In that rotting caravan 8 months ago, something new had suddenly tugged at him, deep down in his guts, and invited him to follow. So Matthew followed. Why not? Until that moment, Matthew's life had consisted of varying degrees of despair, punctuated either by brief snatches of euphoria or the relief of oblivion. When he closed his eyes, listened, and followed, something happened, something that was neither euphoria nor despair, something entirely other. One cool morning in late March, Matthew's mother, Janice, called to tell him that his father, the renowned picture restorer, Monsieur Alain Durand, had died of a heart attack whilst working on a project in the Loire Valley. Matthew and his older brother, Nicholas, were left an equal share of their father's estate. Janice didn't tell Matthew how much, if anything, had been left for her daughter. All she said was that Beth would be comfortable and her care would now be private. She asked Matthew when she'd see him again. He said he didn't know. Then the signal, patchy at best, dropped completely. When it returned, Janice had not tried to call back. Matthew lay back on the slender mattress and stared at a patch of mould on the peeling caravan ceiling, fingers locked behind his head. He had not eaten since his last binge, which finally ran out of steam a few days ago. Now he felt ready for a tentative return to food. There was some bread, but nothing else. Farm inheritance guy told Matthew he could eat apples stored in one of the barns. As many as he wanted, who gives a damn? So apples it is, again. Apples and stale bread. The phone buzzed to life. Nicholas. Matthew hadn't spoken to him in a couple of years. Now his poster boy older brother screamed at him across the miles. Matthew winced and held the phone over his head. The assault was still perfectly audible. After all I've done for them, after all you've done to them, working my arse off while you waste your life, make damn sure you never see a penny of it. The signal dropped again, cutting off Nicholas's diatribe with an innocent double beep, leaving his sibling in a sudden eerie limbo. Matthew stared again at the mould. It was like seeing things in the shapes of clouds. And then it happened, that mysterious intervention. True to his word, Nicholas did whatever it is wealthy people do when they want to stop something happening, and managed to get Matthew's inheritance put on hold. This was achieved under the guise of being for his own good. The story was that access to a large sum of money right now would put Nicholas's younger brother's life seriously at risk. Matthew had danced with death for years, and his brother had paid no attention. But now he played the part of the loving, responsible older sibling to perfection. When he found this out, Matthew sat in the caravan, trembling with impotent rage, just as he had as a child. And then that tugging thing happened again. Matthew's usual tsunami of self-defeating thoughts was halted in its tracks, as though encountering a vast, unexpected wall. He stopped. He listened. What followed is something Matthew had never done before. It had never occurred to him to even try. He created a strategy. He made some inquiries, then, a few days later, called his mother. He told her he'd admitted himself into a treatment centre in Weston and asked if she could transfer enough money to live on until he went in. The cost could then be paid for directly from his inheritance. Janice was sceptical, but she capitulated and said she would talk to Nicholas. Matthew had to make some calls and write some emails and show some evidence, all of which he did with meticulous cooperation. The executors were impressed. A figure of £1,500 was negotiated and transferred into Matthew's bank account. What he didn't tell anyone is that Leon had put him in touch with his criminal law solicitor, who was engaged in an ongoing battle to stop the Russian Chancellor being deported. This solicitor, paid for by Matthew's modest retainer, got him the rest of his money within a couple of weeks. Matthew immediately cancelled his place at the treatment centre and left the caravan. He didn't know where he was going, but it didn't matter. He was following something new, and it seemed to be going okay so far. One thing Matthew did know with absolute certainty was that for as long as he lived, he was never going to eat another apple. That's it.
Brilliant. Your way with words, Gary, just incredible. Absolutely love it. I did say we're not going to do lots of analysis of all these stories, so I won't. But yeah, really, really love it. Just brilliant. So it's hard just to quickly move on, but we have to because we need to try and make sure that we get everybody to be able to share a story. So is it
Nick is up next. Thank you so much, Gary.
Thank you, Gary.
Right. So last year, about 3 months into those 2 weeks to flatten the curve, I discovered something new about myself. And I was pretty shocked because I thought that at 31, I knew myself pretty well already. So when this whole lockdown situation started, I was actually secretly quite thrilled, not about the pandemic, obviously, but about the fact that I got to work from home, which I'd been trying to do for years. And the clients just wouldn't get along with a plan. They wouldn't want to work from home. And it was so frustrating because I would keep telling them, look, I'm not a doctor. There's not much that I can do in person that I can't do over Zoom or Skype. What's the big deal? But I guess habits are hard to break, aren't they? So once people get used to working in person, it is so hard to get them to work online. So when the lockdowns finally started and most of us had to start working from home, I actually felt vindicated. I thought, yes, you're finally having to bite the bullet and having to do what I need you to do, which is to allow me to stop spending half my life fighting with the trains and the buses and the transport of London, because I was so frustrated. I remember that I spent 8 to 10 hours a day outside of the home, of which maybe 4 or 5 were spent doing actual paid work. So it felt like an absolute blessing at first. And I noticed quite quickly that not just the clients, but just about everyone around me, friends and family that I would talk to, they didn't seem to be handling this lockdown situation all that well. Most people seemed to be having some kind of extended meltdown. And every time that I talked to them, they would tell me, oh, I'm going stir crazy. I'm getting cabin fever. I need to get out. I want to see people face to face. And I would think, what are you even talking about? This is great. This is great. And I'm a little ashamed to admit that I even felt, again, a little bit vindicated, a little bit of schadenfreude at their complaints, because I thought, oh, boo-hoo, for once you're getting a little taste of what I and fellow introverts have been going through for most of our lives. Because for those who don't know, I'm not a people person. I really enjoy spending time alone, far more than socializing most of the time, and living in a society where you're pretty much expected to be a social butterfly is exhausting, isn't it? And when people would complain, I thought, look, you'll get over it. It's a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months. I mean, joke's on me on that one, but this is what I thought at the time. You'll be fine. You're just getting a little taste of what it's like to live in a society that is built the exact opposite of how you need it to function. And as I said, about 3 months into those 2 weeks, I was talking to my parents and they were telling me the usual stuff about, oh, cabin fever. Oh, even with a garden, we're sick and tired of being at home. There's only so many times we can throw the ball for the dog. So many times we can cook, so many board games we can play. But you're enjoying this, aren't you? And I said, no, I'm not. I hate it. I hate it. I've been stuck at home for 3 months at this point. I haven't touched anyone. I haven't shaken hands. I haven't hugged a single damn person. And right in that conversation, it finally clicked what was wrong. Because for the past 3 months, except for maybe those first couple of weeks that were pure bliss, and I really enjoyed that extra time that I had on my hands, I had been feeling this uneasiness, and it had slowly been building up, and I didn't have a name for it. I thought it's anxiety about the future. I thought it was anxiety about my health. I thought, am I going to die of this virus? What's going to happen? And when we had that conversation with my parents, it finally clicked that what I'd been feeling all this time was loneliness. And this is something that I'd pretty much mentally written off. I'd put it in that box of, these are things that I'm not likely to ever feel, as a helplessly, hopelessly, over-socialized, burnt-out introvert who just wants to be alone for 5 minutes. And when I had that realization, I thought, wow, if I'm struggling and I'm the least social person that I know. How bad is it for the average person mentally, this whole situation of being stuck at home? So the lesson from that is, for crying out loud, have some empathy. That would be one. Try to put yourself in other people's shoes. The other one would be, you never really stop learning. Just when you think that you know yourself and you have painted this portrait and you've been telling yourself, okay, this is who I am. No, joke's on you. You never really know who you fully are. You're always in a process of discovering it. So then I started doing something that I hadn't really actively done until that point, which is seeking other people out to interact with. And I started doing online networking events, and I loved them. I started fostering deeper connections with people that I knew from LinkedIn and social media. So we would start having virtual coffees that were nothing to do with work. It was just chatting, and it was just fostering that human connection. And the last lesson that I learned from that was, it is good to define yourself in some way and to work on understanding yourself. But when you become too attached to a label, in my case, oh, I'm an introvert, I'll be fine isolated, that's when the problems start happening. So learn to tell the difference between understanding and labeling yourself to death.
Some great lessons there, Nick. And I will also say that I promise we won't have any Schadenfreude in return. We will only offer empathy. And I think we can all probably learn from those lessons as well about, as you say, being understanding of everyone else around and kind of understanding different ways of life. Your last one for me about labels is something that I very, 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 very much consider to be a big part of my kind of philosophy on life. So great lessons and a really great story. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we have Julia up next.
Hello, Stefano. Hello, Cyan. And hello to everyone who is watching us live or on replay. I am so happy to be here and to read to you the following story. Number 1467. Did I actually count you all? I don't think. Did I miss any of you? Maybe I got some of you mixed up along the way, sort of like, wait, I didn't quite get this one, or never mind. Now I'm supposed to figure out what to do next. Well, that's easy. I'll just, or maybe, one thing I know is that you're a difficult one. You make me feel uncomfortable and sad. Oh, and there you are again, 1468. At times, I think I got too used to hearing you. You always speak volumes, even if you're just a two-letter word. And I hate you, I truly do. Not the time, not the place, not the person, not the way. You see, I want the adventure, the fireworks. I want my ideas to take flight. I want the achievement, not the rejection. I want the open door through which I can walk with my head held high. It took me a while, but now I finally understand what you are pointing to. You speak to me of broken expectations, not being chosen, not feeling seen, feeling unworthy, feeling at fault. But is this actually true? Or are you just a blessing in disguise? See, you're also my teacher. You take me back to the drawing board over and over again. You throw that wrench into my not so perfectly laid out plans. You make me focus on the why. You make me step up my game, reframe ideas, and build better bridges. You help me to become, move past the having or the getting. You make my life richer when I get on the other side of you. But it's not an easy process. And it's not easy for me to say this, but here it is. Thank you. However, do you happen to get easier to manage over time? Well, Some of you do, some of you will, others won't. Still, I can't help wondering how many more of you to go. So this piece that I wrote and I shared with you, it's called An Open Letter to a Word. And I hope that you figured out what that word is.
I think we should leave everyone to figure out that word for themselves, but I feel like they probably can. Another magnificent story. I've got to stop analysing, so I'm over to you.
I love how different all of your stories is. That's the only thing I will say. And next up, we have Roslyn.
Hello, hi, lovely to be here. Lovely stories. So I shared a lot on the podcast really about how over and over again I've had to reset my life, sometimes elegantly, sometimes not so elegantly, and the things that I came through. And I thought, what's the best way to summarize it now for you wonderful people in a few minutes? And at the back of my book, actually, Reset, written 3 years ago, I wrote one of those rather lovely letters to my younger self. Clearly, if I wrote it today, it might be slightly different, but I think most of it stands. And I think it really encapsulates all the learning I had from all the stories I share. So I'm going to read that. So apologies that I don't have it on screen. So I'm going to be looking down a little bit, but I'll do my best. So, dear Roz, I want you to take 5 minutes, sit down, breathe deeply, and remember that you are a wonderful, heartfelt young woman. I was writing to my 25-year-old self. What seems like a fork in the road now will lead to greater opportunities. You have courage in spades full, and you do twice what most people do in half the time. But remember, you are a human being, and be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up for your choices or feel that life is hard or unfair. Do not allow yourself at this time to feel depressed or that life isn't worth living. It is, I promise. You are very sensitive and vulnerable, but you wear such an effective mask that others often see you as impenetrable and totally in control. They even try to pull you down because of it. Know that daring to show your vulnerability and to be open to others, to stop judging yourself and others by impossible levels of perfectionism, will be the greatest and kindest gift you can ever give to yourself. Know that you are more than enough and that your intellect and emotional intelligence will take you further than you can even imagine. So don't worry about striving for success. The less you try, the more successful you'll be. When you trust your inner intuition and tap into your inner power, you will not just make the right choices, but intuitively take the right action at the right time. Do not let those who are afraid of your light try to dim it. You're a maverick. You see things differently. You do things differently. And that, coupled with your great sense of compassion, will make the world a better place. You're curious. So remember, questions are the answer. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Seek a better path. Do not be a lemming. Do not follow the herd to fit in, even if it makes others uncomfortable. Yours is a path to change the world, and this will not always be comfortable to you or others. Treat their fear with grace and understanding. Smile. People will always love you for it. Find out what makes you happy and pursue it every day. Feel at ease with this because all you need is already within you. Enjoy the journey. Even the bumpy roads will give you a new level of wisdom. Know that you have a spiritual gift and you'll experience events, insights, and others that others will just try and rubbish. Don't let them. Trust yourself. Learn to let go. It makes skiing, sex, and so many other things much more wonderful. Speaking of which, don't confuse sex for love or see the need for human contact and connection as anything other than sacred and wonderful. Use your body and value your body as you would worship a goddess. Remember, you are more powerful, sexy, physical, sensual than you could ever know. Do not let sexual shaming or guilt diminish you. Sex is like breath. It's vital and wonderful. Know your worth. This is true for finding your future life partner, work, friends, all other connections. For many years, you will be the power behind the throne. Notice now that much of the fame and fortune of those around you will be created by you. If you want to enjoy that or step into the limelight too, then do not feel restricted or not good enough. Do for yourself what you do for others. Pay close attention to your health and finances. Know that to be wealthy, you need a balance of faith, fitness, friends, family, finance, and forgiveness. So be mindful of this balance always. Learn to meditate and be present. It's not your job to make everyone around you happy or kind or fulfilled. That's their journey. You are not a cash cow for others. Earning money and providing for your future family is not your sole responsibility. Do not sacrifice your health or happiness for success. Trust that you know what's right for you. Create great and healthy and nurturing habits. Understand that you've studied for an English literature degree because you feel things deeply and you have a connection to what's real and true in this world. Please write your own books and share your wisdom sooner rather than later. It will flow from you as you tap into something even beyond your present understanding. You're meant to be this messenger and change agent, and you're not supposed to compromise your own happiness or health for it. Only connect. Understand that people who need people really are the happiest people of all. We're all in this together. There's so much more I could share, but I know that you'll be more than okay, more than enough. You'll shine and grow and love and be loved, and your life will enrich others. Feel that, love it. Oh yes, and have intimacy with yourself. It means into me see. I see into you. I'm excited by it, moved by it. I'm in love with it. Yabba dabba doo. Love always, Rosalind.
Wow.
Dabba dabba do indeed.
That's got to be the best ending to any story ever. Sorry, everyone, the story's all amazing, but Yabba Dabba Doo is just a great way to finish.
I stole it. Thank you.
It's okay. We'll forgive the thievery this time. Right. So thank you so much for that, Ros. We will be moving on to our next guest.
To Garima next. Welcome, Garima.
Yeah. Hi. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good. So why don't you share your story with us and all of our lovely viewers out there?
All right. Well, the thing is that you see, like some years ago, I have been a beta reader, helping other people with their manuscripts. And but I recently started being an editor, an editor is different from a beta reader. So, and the thing is that some of the foreigners, their English is not like very good, not up to the standard. And the problem is that nowadays, because of the technology, anybody can go online and publish any book, So it is very difficult. Sometimes even I myself, when I read novels, sometimes I will see you can notice maybe there is a word missing or something doesn't make sense, So it's like some people, they just feel they can write anything. I don't know whether they even consult an editor or not. So one Indian guy, he sent me his manuscript, but the chapter 1. And it was, well, I shouldn't say, in a negative way, but it was not all that good, but I just politely made the changes, and then I sent him an email that, look, I have seen your chapter 1, and these are the changes, and I feel that you need to expand your story, because it was like he was jumping from one thing to another, not actually explaining anything, you know. So initially, when after I sent that email, initially I was doubting whether the guy would reply or not, because some people you can't predict. Some people can take it as an offense, that it's like you are telling the other person that you don't know how to write a story. But it's not like that. You are simply helping the person. You are trying to correct the person that no, it's not up to the standard. So luckily for me, today morning he replied to my email. Well, from his email, he appreciated my effort to correct him. And then he tried to explain himself that he felt there are some things that are not needed, especially with the characters. And I replied to his email. I was like, yeah, I agree with you that, you think that, you are like writing the love story about a particular guy. But I wrote to him in a polite way that, look, you have to also talk about the characters. You have to give some in-depth into the characters, their like routine, what they do, what they wear, because if you do not talk about the characters, how do you expect the readers to be interested? Because when you are reading a novel, you will be interested in the characters. What do they do? What is their daily work? What is their job? How do they interact with other characters? You cannot just jump from one thing to another. And I also added some links to some websites so that he can read the information there and get better perspectives, because I cannot explain everything. So
I think this is a really actually nice point when we're having a session about storytelling, that storytelling is a craft and a process. And I know lots of the people here have written their own books and worked with editors and other people to take that nugget of a story and really craft it into something beautiful that other people can learn from. And it sounds like you're doing a great job to help other people get their stories out there. So thank you for that, Karima.
The reason that we're here, the secondary reason that we're here, is for series 2 of the Storytelling with Puck podcast. So I just wanted to give everyone a chance to understand where you can find it. You can find it on Spotify, you can find it on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. To be honest, anywhere that you can find a podcast, you can probably find Storytelling with Puck. So just type in Storytelling with Puck into even a browser, and it will come up for you, or into wherever you listen to your podcasts, or go to puckcreations.com/storytelling with Puck podcast. Now, I apologize for making you wait, but I promise you this one's going to be worth it. I don't know the story, but I know the person. So, please do the introduction.
Yes, so next up we have Jules.
You built the suspense there, didn't you? I've so much pressure now, and I was trying to think, what story can I share? I've got so many stories, but I have thought of one which was a rather bizarre story, and I feel like it's really verging on a possible ghost story. So here it is, and this is recalling completely from my memory, all right? So in the days when I was dating my ex-husband, so I'm going back a bit here, we decided to go on a very random trip to the Lake District in the UK. And if you're in the UK, you'll know how beautiful that is, part of the country. But it was a bank holiday weekend, so complete madness to get in the car and hope that we may well find ourselves some accommodation when we got there. So off we went. We drove down into beautiful Windermere, and we went from hotel to hotel to hotel. And guess what? Every one of them was full. And so we had nowhere to stay. So we carried on and we thought maybe if we drive just outside Windermere, we'll find somewhere that's perhaps not so popular and not so busy. And as we came out of Windermere, we were driving up a hill and we suddenly saw a sign that said vacancies. So we turned in sharply and we continued to drive up this hill, which seemed to go on forever, and eventually came onto this car park, which was literally empty. So already it was starting to feel a bit strange that it was this beautiful old house. And I mean, as in the ghost stories, an old house. We parked the car, we walked into the reception, great big heavy door that we had to open to walk in. And all of a sudden we're in the reception and it's dark. It's dark wood, it's dark walls, and there's nobody on reception. Rang the bell. Took a little while and down comes a very tall man in a black suit with a straight black tie and very serious, and asked us if we were looking for accommodation. We said, yes, please, room for 2. And we were given the key to room number 1. So yes, the plot thickens. So all of a sudden, where was mother? I'm going to tell you, Andrew, where was mother? So all of a sudden then, as we turned round with our key to room number 1, down comes the stairs, a lady in a long black dress. I'm not even making this up. This is a true story. Her dress was right down to her ankles. She had her hair scraped back in a bun. I mean, you couldn't write it, could you? We went off into our room. In we go to the room, and it was a beautiful room, but it was right on the ground floor, and we had these huge double doors which opened up into like a garden area. I just had every bit of my gut telling me, do not stay in this place a minute longer. We went back out to reception to find out how you get breakfast, whether there's dinner, what's around the hotel area. And we were told that you could have dinner at a certain time, that the front door would be locked at 10 o'clock. Locked at 10 o'clock. At that point, I said to my boyfriend at the time, I really don't want to stay here any longer. And we literally made up a story that we had been called by our family to go home immediately because there was a problem at home. And my mum told me never to lie. So it felt terrible doing it, but I just didn't feel safe. And as we came out of the front door of this big house and got into our car, started the car and started to drive off. And all of a sudden, a man ran from nowhere and banged on my car window, which frightened the life out of me. And as I rolled the window down, just asked me if I knew where the nearest restaurant was or something. And the man was intoxicated. He was quite drunk. So all of those bizarre things kind of added up to me to ask the question, had I entered a parallel universe on this trip to the Lake District? Or was there really a hotel up outside Windermere that had no guests in it on a bank holiday weekend? And that's my story.
My question is, Jules, did you ever really leave?
Who knows?
Oh, that's absolutely brilliant.
A great story and a great example of listening to your gut, whether it was right or wrong. But.
Absolutely. Oh, I must tell you, we ended up on a services motel on the way back down to where we lived, and that's where we spent the night. Very romantic.
But no ghosts, at least.
No ghosts and no strange people in long dresses. So yes.
And nobody banging on your window asking you where the nearest restaurant was.
Exactly.
Fantastic.
Wanting to say, just don't have a shower, for goodness sake.
Motel. Yeah, I know. It's a true story.
All the stuffed birds in the reception area.
Exactly.
Thank you, Jules. And Andrew is up next.
Thank you, San. I'm going to start my story with a reference to a book. I don't know if any of you've read this, Eat, Shoots and Leaves by Lynn Truss. I mean, pretty skillful thing to make a book about punctuation a bestseller. But this story is kind of indirectly about this. When I started my business about 12, 13 years ago. It was called Mojo Life, and it was about helping people find their mojo who'd sort of lost their way a little bit and wanted to maybe reinvent themselves. And myself and my then business partner, Sarah, had an opportunity to exhibit at a very exciting sounding conference called Civil Service Live. Now, if that doesn't get the blood racing, I don't know what will. Civil Service Live. And it was basically designed to help people who were leaving the civil service because of, downsizing, budget cuts and so forth, to maybe reinvent themselves and find a new path. So anyway, we were given a slot, a little unit to exhibit our wares. And our stand was a low budget affair, should we say, compared to some of the others there. But we're in this classic exhibition situation where you have, the aisles through which people walk and then all of the units one after the other. And on the final day, it was rumored that somebody famous was in Olympia, which is where we were exhibiting. And the somebody famous was Peter Jones from Dragon's Den. And for those of you who maybe are overseas, you probably have the series Dragon's Den, I suspect, in your own country. But he's a very, very successful entrepreneur. I think he's 6'7" tall. He's enormous and always immaculately turned out. And there was a little bit of a vibe in the theatre, because we heard that he was there. And then all of a sudden we see these suited men with the little earpieces in, almost whispering into their wrists, a bit like if the president was walking in. And then sure enough, he hoved into view. He came round the corner, very imposing presence, very tall, immaculately turned out, and he walked towards us. And Sarah and I kind of got ready to do our pitch to the dragon about what it is that we were setting up in business. But then tragically, when he got level with our stand, he turned the other way and looked at the exhibition unit opposite side of the aisle. So I thought, oh no, our moment's gone. And Sarah, my then business partner, is quite shy. She's quite introverted, but for some strange reason, some strange force overtook her. And she said something along the lines of, "Oi, Peter, come and speak to us." And I'm going, you can't say that. But she did. And he turned around. He couldn't very well ignore her. He turned around and he walked over to us. And he towers over Sarah because she's not particularly tall. And he said, "Well, what is it you're doing?" And she explained, she gave a very nice sort of summary of what we did. And then he turned to me. And he said something to me which completely flummoxed me. He said, "So your business shrinks." And I must have looked very puzzled, because I'm thinking to myself, now, hang on a minute, we've just set up in business. It's going to grow. We're ambitious. We have plans. But dragons spot the weakness, don't they, in a business concept? He spotted, oh my God, he spotted something. We're going to just disappear out of view. The business will fail before it's almost got started. So I looked very, very worried. And then you could see my expression. And he said, no, I mean your business psychologists. Your business shrinks. In other words, a shrink aside. So eat shoots and leaves. I had thought he said Y-O-U-R, and he actually said Y-O-U''re. And it was a moment of misunderstanding. And once I'd realized what he said, we had a big giggle about it, and the conversation kind of flowed quite nicely after that. But I think the moral of the story really is that when little misunderstandings happen, from a storytelling perspective, they are absolute gold. And you've got to latch onto them, whether you're visiting the Bates Motel, whatever happens, you've got to latch onto those things, put them in your locker, and start sharing them, because they are authentic representations of those little vignettes in life, which make storytelling such a wonderful art. So there'll be, that's my story.
That was brilliant. I am desperately trying not to join any words together to reduce the possibility of ambiguity. That's hard to do with any pace. But a fantastic story, Andrew, as always. And as you say, great lessons as well that you could take from that. I have a feeling that Jules's ears might have pricked up a little when you were talking about one of the dragons too. For those of you who don't know, Jules has had a lot of experience with with the dragons in the past. So
he was my investor, Stefano. So.
I know. So did he ever call you or say anything about your business shrinking, and which version of your was he using when he did?
He didn't ever say about my business shrinking, but I only met him twice after we'd been in the den. So, but he is very tall. I will say that, Andrew. He's about 6'4", if not more. So
that's a fact we can all agree on. he always looks huge on the TV in comparison to others. But Andrew, thank you so much. Another brilliant story.
And time flies quickly when you're having fun. I think we are at our final story. And Carol, would you like to share?
Yes, and please. A little bit of a pressure to be the last one, but okay. I like being the last one, but I might be a bit regretful of the decision. But anyway, it's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate everything that you've been working through and organizing. It's an honor to be part of the Series 1 and to be among these amazing storytellers. And I had a very good time listening to the stories. Speaking about triggers and some stories that might not go very well, but maybe we'll have a happy ending eventually. I will read for you last story of my book that tells a little bit of my story with burnout, which is a subject that I go on and off, but I keep talking about it quite often. It's the day 164 because I would write morning pages and I would number them. And this is the 164th time that I set to write. September 13th, 2019. Maybe you wouldn't recognize me if you ran across each other some years ago. I'd probably be walking across an airport in Brazil, looking down at my phone. I'll be wearing high heels, makeup, dyed up hair, a new dress, and a scarf, some jewelry. I'll be rolling my Samsonite carry-on luggage on one hand, texting with another. It will be around 7 a.m. I had woken up around 4, my bedroom window not entirely closed so I wouldn't sleep in, meaning I also didn't sleep well. It is likely that I had been up until midnight finishing a report or a presentation or watching TV by myself and drinking whiskey to be able to relax. As I approach the terminal exit, my breath is short. I have a pain in my chest. I wouldn't notice this pain for a year. I'm hurrying for everything, doing 3 things at the same time. When I meet the driver that will take me through the traffic jam for about 2 or 3 hours, I open my laptop, connect my hotspot, and answer some more emails. I turn on Skype and people are asking where I am. I receive a phone call that says the client is threatening to cancel our contract and we must think fast about something to keep them. I open the dashboards to check on the metrics of all customers, open rates, read, conversion, hundreds, thousands, hundreds of thousands, over 1 million of revenue for one brand in one medium. Not good enough. I text someone from the team asking if they checked their email. It's not enough to send something on one communication platform. You need to reach your people everywhere. Sometimes I'd not open my laptop and just talk to the driver all the way. I'd often ride with the same driver. He'd talk about his wife. He'd step on the brakes really hard every time, my back coming out of the back seat. We would laugh every now and then, always complaining about the traffic, and yet always in the middle of it. As I get to the office, I'd say good morning to everyone, smiling most of the time. I'd go straight to the room of one particular colleague who would mostly talk about everything that was going wrong and would wonder how to fix it. We were fixers, firefighters in the almost made-up world of marketing. An email went off with the wrong message. A link is broken. The tracking doesn't work. The integration stopped running at 3 a.m. There's this new prospect that needs to understand what impact hiring us will have on his revenue, and we need to prepare a pitch. Someone from the team wants to quit. We need to fire someone from the team. There's an internal meeting a couple of weeks from now, and we need to give input on the organization's strategy. Are our metrics any good? I would have 1, 2, 3, 6 cups of coffee. I would be able to sit and plug my laptop into the charger sometimes. Other times I'll be called by 1, 2, 3 people. Let's go to the meeting room. Tell me what happened. What did the client say about that? Have you tried doing this? Maybe the timing was not good. What was the subject line? Let me have a look at this. I'll call the project manager. We'll think of something. I'd have lunch sometimes. I'd get in another car towards the meeting of the day, wait for 40 minutes. Sorry, they're in a very important meeting that ran late. Can I serve you some water or coffee? An office that looked like a prison, and another one that looked like a resort. One had a floor with skateboards hanging all over the walls, a ramp in the middle of the room, acoustic guitars, hammocks, ping pong tables. When I say, that looks really nice, they say, yeah, nobody uses it. We go to the meeting. We stayed here until 11 p.m. last night trying to solve this broken link. Now we don't know what to tell the director. The skateboards hanging on the walls behind them. I check my email real quick while someone else does the talking. Shit, I forgot to review someone's report and this other client found out that several of the metrics were wrong. Shit, they're mad at us. Shit, they don't trust what we say anymore. Shit. Who would trust someone who makes mistakes? I go back to the office and stay there until 10 or 11 p.m. There was no broken link for me to fix this time, but I'm in the meeting room and one person after the other comes to me. Look, I've got this thing and I don't know what to do. Okay, Carol, we need to think about this project. What version of the spreadsheet are you looking at? I'm usually the last one to leave or one of the last. I turn off the lights and leave the office, get in a taxi that takes me to the hotel. I order room service, talk to my mother, check my emails one last time, watch TV until I fall asleep, plates still on the bed. Someone once wrote that when you have a child, the days are long and the years are short. When you're a workaholic, the days are short and the years are long. I had a great job, much better than expected for my age and self-esteem. I earned enough to be part of the richest 1% of people in my country at the age of 26. Don't get too impressed. 1% in Brazil is still about 2 million people. I was surrounded by educated, privileged people. The equipment I had access to was always incredible. The office had a beautiful view over the city. We could have long lunch breaks around and afford fancy restaurants. I became friends with many people there, some of them who are still my friends. I had the opportunity to travel inside my own country, go to the United States and Chile for the first time. I'd give workshops and keynotes to dozens, hundreds of people. That made me terrified and exhilarated. There was laughter, there was fun, there was something to learn every day, most of the time. The people I worked with were some of the brightest minds I've ever met when it comes to playing the business game. I met all sorts of clients, education platforms, airlines, e-commerces, fashion brands, hotels, resorts, even a TV channel. For a long time, I was able to use my skills on a regular basis and create presentations that sold projects and gave confidence to the people who had just started working there. We had happy hours and an amazing party at the end of each year. I was respected by virtually everyone. My capacity hardly ever questioned. For a long time, and for a lot of reasons, it was an environment that allowed me to develop into the capable, experienced professional I am today. And yet, I burned out hard. Was it my fault?
No.
And that's why in the book. Major spoilers.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Carol. Now, this wouldn't be a good concert gig, launch event, or however you like to put it, if we didn't have an encore. So as much as we said that was going to be the final story, one of our wonderful guests, Ria, has just joined us. And even though she's not been able to see some of the stories and we've literally just thrown this at her, she has kindly said that she is going to share a story with us. So Carol, thank you so much for that. Sorry for putting the pressure on you for being the final story when you're not actually the final story. Ria, would you like to take yourself off mute and take it away and share your story, please?
Absolutely. I'm so sorry. It was connection issues, but I'm here.
No apology necessary.
All right. Okay. My story is called Everyone Loves a Challenge. Who doesn't love a challenge? They're everywhere. If you open your Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook accounts right now, you are bound to come across one. It could be anything from a dance-off to a cook-off. It's there. So when my sister challenged me to a spicy noodles eat-off challenge, I thought, how could I resist? I am no stranger to spicy food. In fact, anything in extra hot will do. So for 2 whole days, the devil red package lay on the tabletop, glaring at me, taunting me. And for 2 whole days, I completely ignored it. Eventually, I reached breaking point, unable to take the taunting anymore. I grabbed the package, I ripped it open, revealing its contents of pure white noodles, a small sachet of chili flakes, and a small sachet of fiery sauce. This was finally happening. I emptied the noodles into a saucepan, taking great care to follow the instructions step by step. I felt my heart skip a beat as I emptied the contents of the fiery red small sachets of sauce and chili flakes. The searing sound it made when it made contact with the hot saucepan, and the aroma that lifted into the air, so strong, so powerful. My heart was no longer skipping a beat, it was racing instead. Forcing myself to calm down, I steadied my hand and emptied the steaming stir-fried contents into a bowl. I was ready. At my desk, I carefully placed the bowl of noodles and a glass of ice-cold milk, which I had also poured in case of emergency. I sat down and placed my cell phone into position, turning the video on to selfie mode. It was showtime. I lifted the bowl, showing the contents to the camera, and proceeded to get ready for the first bite. I swirled a decent helping of noodles around the fork, making sure it was firmly in place. As I bravely raised the fork to my mouth, the intense spicy aroma sent warning signals, halting the fork just before I opened my mouth. Very similar to when you're about to take a sip of hot coffee and the intense heat from the cup stops you, except in this case, it was fear. Fear of what if I can't do this? What if I really can't do this? Reasoning with myself, I said, surely it's not that bad. Others have done this. Why can't I? So I thought, instead of diving straight in, let me test the contents by dipping in just the tip of my tongue, which I did. This isn't too bad, I thought to myself. And so I did it a second time, just to make sure. This really isn't as bad as everybody said. And so I bravely popped the first bite into my mouth, chewing and swirling it around my tongue, eagerly waiting to get to the next bite. I had barely swallowed when a certain heat set in. It seemed to settle as a layer just beneath the surface of my tongue. It was slow but steady, and it felt as if someone was steadily turning the heat up, second after second. I barely had time to process that when I felt the heat move up to my ears. A strange ringing started to occur. The air filled with nothing but the ringing. The heat proceeded on its trajectory, moving up into my eyes. Tears started to fill, completely blocking my vision. It eventually reached my brain, where it felt like a loud fire alarm was going off. Suddenly, it shot straight down to my right leg, causing it to shake uncontrollably in an up and down movement. I had never experienced anything like this before, and it was all happening so fast. I felt paralyzed. I was unable to talk or scream. It felt like fire was streaming out of my ears. I just sat there in silence, eyes closed, and as the sensation took over my body, little sweat beads started to form on my forehead. I quickly swallowed, hoping to take a sip of cold milk to calm down the fire in my mouth. Instead, a bout of hiccups followed. I felt like I was dying. I heard that taking a few deep breaths helped, so I decided to do that instead. Midway into my first attempt, the hiccup was rudely interrupted. I tried yet again. Nope, the hiccups were having none of it. I gave out a nervous giggle, thinking, what have I got myself into? I calmed myself down and tried yet again. This time I managed a long, deep breath, holding it in for at least 20 seconds, and then exhaled. I waited. Nothing. No hiccups. I waited a little longer just to be sure. Yep, they were gone. They were really gone. I quickly grabbed the glass of ice cold milk and took a mouthful, careful not to swallow. I kept it just over my tongue until the heat subsided. Oh, the cooling effect was heavenly. After I swallowed, I just sat like that for a few seconds, eyes closed, patiently waiting for the head rush from this experience to subside. I finally opened my eyes and looked into the camera, eyes bloodshot, and gave out a laugh, knowing that the bowl was still full and that I still had a few more rounds to go. That's my story.
I think we can all feel the fire. Oh, such a brilliant story. Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to have all of you here and to hear all of your amazing stories. I think as Cyan said earlier, they were just also different, weren't they?
So different topics, different formats. I like that there were a few about food. We always have a recurring theme of food, I think, in the podcast, which is a favourite one of mine. So reminder that the series 2 of our podcast is launching tomorrow, and after that we'll be releasing one per week, so you can keep up with all the stories.
Now, anybody who has been listening to series 1 of the podcast will know that we always start in the same way that we finish. So we thought we probably should do that as well today to keep up tradition. So we're going to say goodbye to everybody. But before we let you all go and before we stop the recording, there's going to be one last story, and that's going to come from us at Puck Creations. This story was actually inspired by somebody else sitting in the room, Jules White, who asked us to all share a story about a gift a while back in one of her networking groups. So here we go. I'm going to have to read off a different screen, so apologies if I'm looking down a little bit whilst I'm doing this, but I'll give it a go. Sitting in my living room just a few days before Christmas, I couldn't help but look over at the tree. I kept walking towards it, picking the presents up, listening to them, feeling them, smelling them, and wondering what exactly it was I had to look forward to. So, like many kids at this time of year, I was very excited. By the time I had gone to bed and returned to the living room the next day, something else had arrived. There was no possibility of missing it. It was huge. It was rectangular in shape with sharp edges. It didn't really smell of anything, and it was way too heavy to be able to pick up. Nervous excitement was flowing through my body, but no matter how much I searched, I just couldn't see a tag. Who was this gift for? So a few of you here might know that I am the youngest of 6 children. That meant the present could have been for any one of us, or maybe even for someone in the extended family who was attending this year. We often had a lot of people come over at Christmas, huge occasions. Nobody would say, so we had to wait until Christmas Day to find out. Of course, like many of you will have done, I woke up very early, and I also made sure that everybody else in the house was awake too. We had to make sure that this was the longest day of the year, as it was, of course, the best day of the year. It wasn't just about presents. Even as a kid, our parents always emphasized the importance of family, sharing food, it's why I'm fat, conversation, and spending time together. We also had to embrace the original meaning of Christmas. So I'm no longer religious, but we were brought up as strict Catholics. Still, we were allowed to start opening presents. Oh, I was excited. I wanted to see everything, but not just me, everybody in the family, other than the people who bought it, wanted to know who the big present was for. Of course, for some of the younger viewers out there, it definitely came from Santa. And we also wanted to know exactly what it was. Kids, this is for all 6 of you to share. No fighting, or it goes back. Wow. We opened it together, tearing at the paper and getting a glimpse through every new little slit. What was it? Well, it was a box, but inside that box was something truly wonderful. A Yamaha keyboard. So many keys and buttons. It felt amazing. But it wasn't long before my elder siblings took it and started to play together. I wasn't big enough to fight for my turn. Now, this present, as much as it was amazing, this wasn't my favorite gift that day. I got something else. My clever parents had discussed with Santa and had realized that I probably wouldn't get my fair share of playing time on the big keyboard. So my mini keyboard came too. It didn't have as many buttons or features, but the keys were my finger size, and it was all for me. I could play as and when I wanted. As soon as I was allowed, I ran up to my room with it and started just touching the keys. I learned so much. It was my first introduction to actually playing music. I loved it. I never got bored, and I still play the keyboard occasionally to this day, even as an adult. But it wasn't long before my other siblings did get bored of the big keyboard. They had other hobbies, and the big keyboard started to gather dust. I felt like I was ready to make the big step and move my playing time across. But my love for music and for playing would probably never have started without the chance to play the mini keyboard. Over time, as many children do, I became less attached to that keyboard. The big keyboard was all I played, and actually, we still have it here in our home in the Netherlands. It still gets played now. I probably should do it a bit more, if I'm honest. So, it sang my childhood home until very recent. Sadly, my father passed away a very short while ago, and my mother has passed away a long, long time ago. So my family has started sorting through some of our old things in the family home. I'm having to do this from a distance because of the situation that we all know about, and I'm currently in another country. So my brother kindly sorted through my old room with me using, modern technology, FaceTime, like we use today. And he came across that mini keyboard. He asked me if I'd like to keep it. I said no. As long as it goes to his young, music-loving daughter. That way, the keyboard can pass a love of playing through the generations.